Okay, gang, this is a special class I'm going to record. It's basically dealing in a post-hurricane, post-force majeure situation. I've got a lot of questions coming up right now, and rightfully so. And I want to cover some typical items. I'm going to try and get this done like in 15 minutes max. I'll try and be as quickly as I go through quickly as I can. I'm going to reference paragraph G of under section 18 later, which is the force majeure, but you need to watch. I have a specific class that's been recorded on that paragraph alone. So I'm going to reference it here, but we're going to discuss it. Okay, so first of all, I'm glad everybody has come through this storm from what we can tell as virtually unscathed as we possibly could imagine. So we're grateful for that. So I want to talk about how we're going to deal with situations afterwards. Let me start with this. None of us are attorneys and or should be acting as such. This is how we're going to portray our position on how we read the contract. However, there will be debate on this. There will be people that could argue both sides of what I'm about to tell you. So I don't want you to think this is a be all end all. I want to arm you with some bullets that you can go back to other agents if they're trying to push back and on certain things, and also go back to your clients. And they may not like what you're going to tell them, but the contract is very clear. All right, in my opinion. However, will there be people who argue it otherwise? Yes, there will. So let's start. Okay. There are certain things that kick in. The first thing that we're going to talk about, we're going to try and hit them in orders in paragraph 5. All right. In paragraph 5, extension of closing date. All right. If paragraph 8B is checked and closing funds from buyers lenders are not available by closing date due to that's dealing with a CFPB issue, closing disclosure. We all know about that. Then it automatically extends. This is where we're involved with now in part B. In an event constituting force majeure, which I said that's a paragraph G in section 18 later on, you need to watch the class on that, causes services essential for closing to be unavailable, including the unavailability of utilities or issuance of hazard, wind, flood, or homeowners insurance. Closing date shall be extended as provided in Standard G. That's why we're going to go to Standard G. However, most people only read this part, saying causes services essential for closing to be unavailable. There are other issues that would allow you, your client, to invoke force majeure, not just the unavailability of services. You need to watch my paragraph on paragraph G. All right. So here is where it's first mentioned. It says, hey, look, we're going to extend the closing date to Standard G. Now, be sure you watch my addendum to the standard or to the force majeure class, because I did a quick minute and 45 seconds on discussing how that paragraph in Standard G also extends other time periods of the contract, not just the closing date, meaning financing periods, loan approval periods, as well as inspection periods. So you need to know that. All right. Then the next thing we're going to have to deal with is in paragraph 12. So I'm going to scroll down to paragraph 12. Specifically part B. Here, we're getting a lot of questions right now. Okay, the lender is mandating a reinspection, all right? As well they should, as well as the buyer would want a reinspection. Let's say we got a situation, we're under contract, the closing got delayed, there was an automatic extension. Again, see my class on force majeure. Automatic extension kicks in, extending all the periods, time periods in the contract. But now the buyer is insisting, or the lender is insisting, or both are insisting, as rightfully they should, to reinspect the property prior to the closing date to make sure it's there. Okay. Now let's just walk through this here. Part B, walk through inspections. On the day prior to closing date or on the closing date prior to time of closing as specified by buyer. So we got some time now prior to the closing date. Buyer or buyer's representative, all that being lender requirement or a home inspector may perform a walkthrough and follow-up walkthrough if necessary. Inspection of the property solely, here's what you're going to do. This is what we're going to do. We're not looking to find new items, but we are looking to find items that have been damaged since the last time we saw the property, which we're going to have more of after a hurricane or some type of calamity, disaster type event. Okay, but here's what we're going to solely to confirm that all the items of personal property are on the property, like they left the things that they were supposed to leave, and to verify that the seller has maintained the property as required by the as-is maintenance requirement. If you remember the as-is maintenance requirement, it says that the seller shall maintain the property even after the inspection in the current condition except for normal wear and tear. If we come back and a tree has fallen through the roof due to the hurricane, that is not normal wear and tear. We kind of joke about that, but that is going to have to be replaced and or maintained by the seller up to a limit. We'll talk about that in a second. All right, as required by the as-is maintenance required has met. So the fact that I've got some sellers right now, whether we represent them or on the other side, that are trying to argue that the buyer has no right to get back in. They've already had their inspection period and it's over. No, this is the section of the contract you're going to point to that's going to tell them absolutely the buyer has a right, even if you're going to call it your final walkthrough. But you want to make sure that the seller has maintained the property as required by the as-is maintenance requirement. By the way, if you're getting in dialogue with other agents about discrepancies in this, you need to use contract language in your argument. My older son Joseph, is taking geometry right now, and he has to do a lot of proofs. And these proofs have to have reasons why he's making a statement. You can't just say, we need to extend. No, you say, look, there's an automatic extension per paragraph G. The force majeure clause says an automatic extension already exists, and highlight and include that in your email you send them. If they're saying you can't have an inspection, say, no, we have a right to do that. And we're going to confirm that the seller has maintained the property as required by the as-is maintenance requirement and has met all other contractual obligations. Don't just say it's because it's the right thing to do. Say, give yourself a reason. Make a statement, give the evidence. Make a statement, give the evidence. I want to encourage you to use contractual reasoning in your arguments or in your discussions with the other sides. All right, and even when you're dealing with your own clients, they may not like what you're going to say. A seller may not like that there's an automatic extension in place, but there is. Right now, they can argue with it. They hadn't, and if they choose to do their own thing, again, hey, look, seek your own legal counsel. If you got an attorney that wants to defend you in that decision, that's great. I have no problem with that, but I just want to make sure you understand my reading of the contract, even though I'm not an attorney, and you are prepared to handle yourself accordingly, is the way I would word it, right? So here's your right, the buyer's right, to re-inspect. Now, again, is there going to be gray areas and debate about what can be re-inspected? How long do we have to re-inspect? Are the services available? Yes, these are all things that are going to have to be hashed out. I'm going to encourage you, let me say that, to, deal with everybody, put yourself in other people's shoes, understand everybody's going to be a little frustrated right now, but we can work through this. This is doable. This is simple. I got this. The contract has covered a lot of this, and we can go through it and do. Okay, so everybody understands that. That gives the buyer a right to do that. Then we're going to proceed all the way to paragraph 18 into section G, which is force majeure. This thing is loaded. We don't realize it. We skip over it a lot of times because it's not that big of a deal, but right now it's a big deal. So you need to read that, watch my class specific to this. Here, note that or is very important because that gives us other availability or other reasons to invoke force majeure other than the unavailability or the non-availability, I should say, of services. There could be other things. So watch my class on that. And it says all time periods. All right. So if you got somebody that's pushing back on you saying they don't want to allow you more time to do your inspections because you're having, this got delayed because of force majeure, this gives you that right to do that. So make sure you see that class on that. All right, so that's enough I'm going to say on paragraph G. And then I'm finally going to go down all the way to paragraph M. I don't have a class on this yet. Risk of loss. Here is where, even on an as-is contract, if a something major has happened, right, that has damaged a property after the effective date but before the closing, the property is damaged. Okay, here we go. This is important, risk of loss. If after effective date but before closing, property is damaged by fire or other casualty lost, and the cost of restoration, which shall include the cost of pruning and removing damaged trees, does not exceed 1.5% of the purchase price. Everybody with me there? Okay, so, well, I thought 1.5%, I thought that was waived on it. No, it is waived on an as-is contract. That's for normal repairs. This is something after the effective date. We're already under contract and probably after inspection, but this is all damaged and got some major damages. If it's inside of 1.5%, then the seller needs to do it. Now, will the seller possibly make an insurance claim on that? Sure. All right, but they can't just get out of the contract. However, let's just use simple math. $200,000 purchase price, 1.5% is $3,000. If it's inside of $3,000 to fix it, the seller is obligated to do it. Okay. So it says it does not exceed the 1.5%. Cost of the restoration shall be an obligation of the seller, and closing shall proceed pursuant to terms of this contract. If the restoration is able to be completed as of the closing date and we're all ready to go, then a sum equal to 125%. So let's say we had an estimate of $2,000 to fix this stuff, but it hasn't been done yet. Then 125%, or in this case, $2,500 of the estimated cost to complete the restoration, again, not to exceed 1.5% of the purchase price, will be escrowed at closing. If the actual cost of restoration exceeds the escrowed amount, seller shall pay such actual costs, but not in excess of 1.5%. So that's the maximum they're obligated to. Any unused portion of escrowed amount shall be returned to the seller. If the cost of restoration exceeds 1.5%, okay, I'm sorry, back up here. If the estimate, and we hadn't closed it yet and hasn't been fixed, all right, and the estimate hadn't been received yet, and the buyer and seller agree that we'll just put the full 1.5% in closing or in escrow, all right, the full $3,000, and if it comes in less than that, then the extra money goes back to the seller after closing. Okay. Any unused portion shall go back to the seller if the cost of restoration exceeds 1.5%. So let's say it was major. We exceeded the $3,000. Buyers shall elect to either take the property as is together with the 1.5%. So the buyer could say, you know what, I'll take the $3,000. I know it's going to cost $8,000 to fix. I'm okay with it. I need a place to live. I'll take the $3,000 and I'll deal with it later, or receive a refund of the deposit, thereby releasing buyer and seller. So if it comes in at $8,000, that exceeds the 1.5%, the buyer can say, all right, I'll take the $3,000 and I'll pay the difference and just take care of it, or the buyer can do it. Now, the other option, I guess, third option would be the seller could say, hey, you know what? I'm only obligated up to $3,000, but I'm willing to pay the whole $8,000 to make it go away and get us to closing. All right. Seller's sole obligation with respect to tree damage by casualty, other non-natural, shall be the cost of pruning or removal. Okay. That's an interesting clause there. I'm just reading that. So the seller's sole obligation with respect to tree damage by casualty or other natural occurrence shall be cost of pruning or removal. That is interesting. I'd have to have an attorney give me a definition or not, whether or not then it's saying the seller wouldn't be obligated to fix a damaged thing. But I think insurance would kick in that case. All right. So here we are in a nutshell. I'm already at 15 minutes. Let me try and wrap it up. Okay. Automatic extension of closing date. That's on paragraph 5. Paragraph 12 talks about the right of a buyer, all right, to be able to re-inspect the property. All right. So go all the way to paragraph 12. All right, to re-inspect the property, and that's a subparagraph B, to confirm that the seller has maintained its as-is requirement. Paragraph G under section 18 is the force majeure. That's where you're going to point to give evidence of all this. And then finally, M is going to talk about, okay, once we had gone out and re-inspected it, what happens if it's under 1.5%? What happens if it is over 1.5%? What happens? What are our options here? Once again, remember, we do not need an extension signed. The extension is already automatically in place under paragraph G, force majeure. All right. Now, again, will people argue with you? Yes. Will the lender possibly come back and say, hey, look, I know it does, but we want everybody to sign it? That they could, but you could point to them and say, hey, look, we've got an automatic extension. We're all good to go. All right. Just be aware that final closing thoughts, don't act as an attorney. Have them, be understanding of all parties. You may have to deliver messages that your clients don't want to hear. All right. But let's all work together to make this happen. Once again, I'm happy that everybody's come to this okay. If you have any more specific questions, reach out anytime. We're here to help. But I wanted to get this out there because it seems like I'm answering the same thing over and over again. So I want to make sure that we are aware where that we have this available. And please watch this and pass it along to others. And again, if you're trying to convince somebody, deliver a valid argument. Okay, state your case, provide your proof, contractually what everybody's agreed to. If you can't agree to that, just say, you know what, then it looks like the attorneys are going to have to hash it out. But I'd like to try and think that we can read this reasonably and all agree to make this happen. All right, guys, have a fantastic day. Continue to go. I'm going to record another quick message to you here soon, so look for an email regarding that, regarding how this is our chance to shine at this time. Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful day. You guys are the best.